For more on Canada's role with the White Helmets rescue, it's time once again for the Sunday Scrum. Joining me today in Ottawa, freelance columnist Susan Riley. Hey, Susan.
Good morning, Natasha.
Good morning. And in Toronto, radio host with 640 Toronto and iPolitics columnist Tasha Carradine. Hi, Tasha.
Hi, Natasha.
Okay, guys, so you heard from the guy that broke the news. You're hearing from one of the lawyers supporting the White Helmets. Major developments overnight and into today. And of course, the Canadian government playing a role. Susan, we're hearing that the government was involved in the logistics of this rescue operation. And we're now hearing that we're going to be resettling a number of these White Helmets volunteers and their family members, possibly as many as 250 people in Canada. So what is your reaction to that response?
My reaction is that Canada's role seems to be appropriate. Canada has successfully integrated a lot of Syrian refugees to date, and there remains a kind of an openness, I think, to that particular kind of refugees reinstatement here in Canada. It's interesting that some of the reports, this is all new to us, of course, so we're only basing it on reports partial reports, but some reports suggest that at the recent NATO summit, which was widely described as a disaster, Chrystia Freeland made a very impassioned plea for action, for a rescue operation for these White Helmets in this particular part of Syria. That could have had some influence, I suppose, but Canada, Britain, the Netherlands, were all involved behind the scenes in advancing this thing, which just kind of goes to show that you don't really know what happens behind closed doors at these meetings. And if this was an outcome, it will be seen as a victory, I think, a political, like a PR victory at least, for Justin Trudeau and his emphasis on multilateralism and on Canada's role as a kind of helper in the world.
Tasha, I want to get your response in just a second, but because Susan rightly mentioned that our Foreign Affairs Minister has really pushed on this issue of supporting the White Helmets, let's bring up part of her statement that she released, saying Canada has been a key partner of the White Helmets. We feel a deep moral responsibility towards these brave and selfless people. So, Tasha, that's where our federal government stands on this. You know, we don't know the extent as yet in terms of the logistical response, but now this commitment to helping the White Helmets and their families resettle in Canada, your reaction?
Well, I think that it's hard to argue with people who've been risking their lives in a war zone that they are not at risk for their own existence, survival, liberty. I mean, under any definition of refugee, under the UN Convention of Refugees, they probably would qualify for that. I think for the federal government, you know, the immigration/refugee issue is a particularly thorny one right now. Like I said, while it's hard to object to this group seeking sanctuary in Canada, questions will probably be raised as to the handling the government is doing of the refugee question at our own borders, and also perhaps of the role other countries are playing. I don't believe the United States was actively involved in this, unless I'm mistaken, and it's not clear whether the U.S. is going to be taking in any of the White Helmets either. There's, you know, the whole, you mentioned the NATO summit. Russia has long considered this group, obviously for their own purposes, as terrorists, and they're not, in my view, but that whole dynamic that's playing out between the U.S. and Russia and the sort of rapprochement we have seen is disturbing to say the least, and it sort of emphasizes, I guess, the fact that Canada and many other countries are on potentially offside as well on policy, not only with regards to our relationship with Russia, but the U.S. relationship with it. So for Justin Trudeau, I don't see this as necessarily a big win or score of any kind. I think it's just the right thing to do, but I don't know if it's going to help him politically here, simply with all the other things that are playing out.
Let's dig up. Sorry, Susan, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's still early in the day. I suggest that Donald Trump is going to be tweeting and taking credit for this rescue at any moment now. So
who knows? That's a good point. You don't know what his response will be. Just in light of what the Russians have, I mean, the fact this group was actually fighting and fearing that the Russian-backed forces were going to be part of the advance that was going to encircle them in the region that they were evacuated from, I think speaks volumes to what's going on there.
Let's dig in a bit into, for the folks involved, this is a good news story. Obviously, people have been rescued out of a civil war that's been going on for years. But as you mentioned, Tasha, there is some dispute as to who and what the White Helmets are. So the Russians would argue they are in bed with Islamist organizations. And if Twitter is any measure, already people are responding saying they don't want these individuals coming to Canada. Is this potentially going to become a contentious issue again for the Trudeau government moving forward? Susan?
I doubt it. I haven't seen that Twitter reaction, actually, but I would have thought, and I still think, that there is a special sympathy for people fleeing Syria. I mean, the fact that the war is going on still will come as a surprise to some people. I think people more or less sort of, brushed their hands and moved on. Everything that happens in that part of the world is murky. And true, the white helmets have been accused of being, terrorists by Russians and by the Assad regime. I expect the fact that the pointy end of this rescue mission was Israel is going to also be used to criticize the organization from another point of view, that they are, agents of Israel, which of course is widely loathed throughout the Middle East. So it's a really murky area. But on a strictly humanitarian basis, as you were saying earlier, I mean, these people were facing certain death, as are many others who are still there, by the way. I think it's entirely appropriate that Canada joined other nations in responding.
Tasha, very quick final word on this topic too.
Yeah, it depends. I think what also the response of other countries is Canada doing a part that our citizens think is the right thing to do in terms of numbers, that kind of thing, or will we be seen to just Justin Trudeau again wanting to look good in the eyes of the world with regards to refugees? I haven't seen that Twitter response either, but the very fact that it's there, like I said, I think that the whole issue of refugees is a tough one right now for the federal government, and they need to play this carefully.
Okay, we'll have to leave that part of the conversation there, but I'm sure this will come up again as the story develops. Time to remind you how you can get involved with the debate. You can tweet me at Natasha Fada on Twitter and use the hashtag SundayScrum. But up next, we're going to take a look at the Liberal government's revamped cabinet.